Let's talk about this and a whole lot more with the Saturday Herald Sun columnist, now made here at Sky News, none other than Steve Price, James Morrow, Sky News host, federal political editor for the Daily Telegraph, and Rose Jackson, who I'm sure will tell you about everything the Labor Party's going to do when it comes to cost of living. But till then, Shadow Water, Shadow Housing Minister, one and all, hello. So, Australia Day polling, you had some insight into this today about the IPA polling in particular, James, that still says majority of people well and truly back it. But let's get to the central point here. Who hates it? The Greens.
The Greens hate it, but you know who else hates it is the woke corporates, and that was one of the big things that came out of this study. And the IPA has found that since 2019, the support for Australia Day staying on the same date has gone from 75 down to 62%. It's absolutely dying among the young people, who of course tend that way, but who have also been indoctrinated in the school curriculum, you know, with everything about Australia being illegitimate, Invasion Day, all of this sort of stuff. And of course, all these corporations who, you know, in the name of reconciliation, are now going out to tick a box on their RAPs and say, oh, well, you know, just take the day off and we're not going to celebrate it. And, you know, we saw Woolworths, we've seen Kmart, we saw P&O Cruises, which they walked back. And anybody who's in corporate Australia will tell you that this is what's going on. There's a concerted campaign. These are also the same people that Anthony Albanese, of course, is relying on to push the Yes campaign on the Voice to Parliament forum.
Interesting point you make about P&O. Credit to the CEO, because as soon as he was made aware of it, said, no, this is crap, we're not doing this. Instead, he said he was unaware of the decision, which means so many times these sorts of things are being made in the marketing department somewhere else, and the ultimate person responsible for the business is not aware of the decisions that are being made. So I'll change the question here. Steve, 5 years from now, what do we do on January 26th?
Sadly, I don't think we have a January 26th, which is really sad for me to say, because like you, Paul, I believe it should stay on that date. But you know what happens with young people? I mean, they get almost shamed into the fact that they say that they support Australia Day. Secretly, they probably do, but when someone asks them, you know, Vox pop out in the street for a TV program or whatever, they say, oh, no, that's Invasion Day, we don't want to have anything to do with that. The problem that we're going to have is we are going to lose the younger group of people. Anyone under the age of, say, 35 are going to probably say, well, let's just change the date. I don't know about anyone else there tonight, but I get sick and tired of this. It goes on every year, this discussion. We have a proud country, like you mentioned, Paul, and we love to have Australia Day, particularly a barbecue. But I'll tell you what happened to me. The most un-Australian thing in the world happened to me 2 weeks ago. I got back from a week away from Australia. I got home, and what did I find? Someone had stolen my barbecue off my deck. Gone. Completely
Mate, I don't know
gone.
how big that barbecue
so I've had to
is. Did
report
they
it
bring
to
a
the
truck?
local police.
You're an outdoor kitchen man.
Oh,
you don't just have a Weber. You've got an outdoor kitchen. You've had that sweet radio money all those years. You've got an outdoor kitchen.
It was a Harvey. It was the $10,000 Harvey Norman special. It's gone. So I can't even have a barbecue on Thursday.
All right, so if anyone's seen a 28-burner barbecue with 4 different fridges connected to it, you know, with pricey, you know, everything at pricey spec, then it was his joint. Rose, 5 years from now, January the 26th, is that Australia Day, or we celebrate Republic Day on July the 1st, 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is inevitably heading in one direction. I actually don't like trash talking the intelligence of young people. I mean, they may not agree with you guys, but that doesn't mean they're dumb. It doesn't mean they're brainwashed.
They can be
that
wrong.
They can be wrong.
They can, but
Hang on a minute. Don't verbal me. I didn't.
Steve, I was literally just about to invite you to a barbecue at my house in Sydney. So that invite's revoked if you're not going to be finished. But I reckon, you know, young people are able to make informed decisions about whether or not. I mean, what I hate the yelling too. I hate every year. It's like if you don't want to have a barbecue on Australia Day, you hate this country. If you do want to have a barbecue, you're a racist. I hate it too. You know what? Like, why don't we argue for what we believe in, but do it in a way that brings people with you? And I'm not sure that conversation is the one that we're having.
But important to note, right? In that polling, majority of 18 to 24-year-olds were anti. Majority of 24 to 35s were pro. So we are talking about the youngest section of younger Australians, and things change, of course, upon all different exposures to things. It's just that it's pretty obvious where it's coming from, which is the hard left of the country, right? It's the Greens, and the fact that, you know, this annual conversation that they're able to get to to the corporates, and they're able to get shows
I don't think the
bullying
Greens
power.
is setting, the agenda of big corporate Australia, Paul.
No, but I think that their supporters well and truly know how to write a complaint email, which is why I say, if you want it to stay, if you like, you say thank you, right? See what happens. It'll all be out there in the wash. But the other question is about whether or not a national day is something that the far left will ever want to celebrate in this country. And that's the actual bigger issue here. Because as we know, January the 1st, that's when women didn't have the vote in 1901, so that'll be a problem. We all know that March the 13th wasn't particularly great for Indigenous Australians in 1788 either. September the 14th wasn't amazing in 1820, let alone, 1924.
No, Paul, I mean, the thing is about this, it's not just the Greens, but it's the hard left faction of Labour, and they're all at heart socialist revolutionaries, and there's two things that they've got in common there. Number one, they cannot stand to see people have fun, because fun gets in the way of their plans to create a social utopia, and you can't do that when everybody's having a good time.
And your social life. I'll take you on any day of the week. I know how to have fun.
Number two, you're not agreed. You're not agreed.
I'm in the left of the Labor Party, though.
They cannot also, have any sort of thing that mythologizes Australia in a positive way. So you move them to any of the 365 days on the year, and they will find a reason to carp and say, well, we really shouldn't celebrate Australia because, it's kind of illegitimate and all of that. They will always say it no matter what one of the 365 days of the year you choose.
So, about what I mentioned about this study that came out of Western Australia today, national picture about police. 3 times the number of police taking their own lives, middle-aged, blokes. You know the numbers from here. Rose, how do we help them? How do we make sure that we can bring that number down? Certainly there's a Royal Commission at the moment. When it comes to veterans, I don't want to be honest, go through that whole process when we know what the reality is here. How do we better help these people? Because I know even, young women that I know that are paramedics quit really early because of the trauma that they will never forget.
Yeah, and suicide is just the tip of the iceberg. The mental health pressure that our first responders are under is extreme. My brother-in-law is a cop. I see with him, how much it has affected him, dealing, as you say, every single day with trauma, with people living, in incredibly difficult circumstances. The worst day of their lives is every day for a police officer. One thing I think we can really invest in is peer-to-peer support. A lot of these guys going to a doctor, going to a professional, that needs to be there, but peer-to-peer, mate-to-mate is actually one thing that I've really seen in my family's helped. And actually, if we build up the structure, I think we can get those conversations happening early so we deal with it at the low level before, it gets out of control for some people. And unfortunately, we are seeing far too many police officers taking their own lives.
The cop and the left wing of the Labor Party. Christmas must be fun. Christmas must be fun at your joint. We'll televise it next year. Steve, I think another potential scenario here is to swamp with more officers to make sure that it's not the exposure of the smaller police force to an increasing population number of people. Now, of course, the left will hate the idea of way more police, but if it means there's fewer interactions of trauma, well, that's good, right?
One of the worst things I ever covered as a journalist was the 1988 double murders of Steve Tynan and Damien Eyre in Walsh Street in Melbourne. Those two coppers were 20 and 21 years old. Pulled up behind a stolen car. The car was empty. The crooks were hiding in a bush behind a house and came out and executed them because there was a gangland war on at the time. We should do everything we can to support our police officers, and far too many of them, as we've said, Rose makes the point about suicide, but far too many of them are being gunned down by criminals with weapons. Look what happened in Queensland. That was just such a tragedy for all of us. So we do need to protect our police as much as we can, give them the powers that they need, and give them the public support that they deserve.